I wasn't born then, so I only know about the town, about the city, that I've heard that it was a fine city, and but I personally, I was born in 1934, so I can't really tell you anything. I left Germany when I was 4, therefore I wasn't old enough to really communicate with neighbours about a city. It wasn't the sort of conversation little children would have, I don't think. So I don't think I can really tell you anything. Not to my memory, because as I say, I don't think with a child of that age, I have grandchildren of that age, and I don't think I discuss with them a lot about London, other than obvious landmarks perhaps that they visit. I can't tell you anything about that. Only things I've learnt now, only things that I've learnt as an adult. I can't remember things about it. I think a lot of things that people remember or think they remember are from being told about them again and perhaps seeing photographs. I don't know how much people really do remember, certainly about world events. I've just learnt more in recent years, and from talking to people and their experiences, which I'm sure you've done with other people as well. I just believe it had been a very fine place to live in, and people were happy here. I think it came as quite a shock to people to realise that they were no longer welcome and weren't wanted here. I often think that I have that feeling in England, that I feel secure in England, and I realise if the same thing happened to us, how I would feel, and I imagine that's how people must have felt, adults must have felt in Germany. I would feel betrayed, I suppose. I think when you're comfortable and relaxed and you don't have any shields around you, you're very much more vulnerable, and I think that you're more shocked and hurt than if you're constantly aware that you're in danger, if you like. And I think it comes much more of a shock. But from a personal level, I don't know anything that happened at that time. Well, I was born in 1934, and I think my parents lived. My father didn't earn a lot of money, from what I've learnt. And we lived happily with family here in Fürth and in Nuremberg. I only understand recently from a cousin who I've recently found that our mothers would go to the opera every week, and they would enjoy the culture that was here. I, as a little child, don't truly remember very much about what happened at all. I didn't go to school yet. My parents were older. Apparently it was 7 years before I was born, after they were married. I don't know that they were that young when they married. And in 1938, beginning of 39, I was put on a Kindertransport. My parents, I believe, felt that they would be able to come out to England later to join me, but that never happened. I picture now really more when I see my little grandchildren of the age that I was at. Just can't imagine that a child that age could go and leave their parents. There's a bewilderment, and I don't think you really know what's happening. You can't understand why you're going. No, I was alone. Having waited 7 years for me to be born, I'm sure that it was an unbelievable wrench for them to make that decision to try to save me and send me away. They did know that I was going to a family. What had happened was, I've only just learnt this very recently, excuse me. Apparently I had older cousins, and one of them went to America, and she knew somebody in London, and she visited her and said that she had a very young cousin, and could she make any suggestion what they could do. They went to the local synagogue to speak to the rabbi there, and they had got a list of people who had said they would be prepared to take a child, to look after a child. And so I was married up with one of these families, and so I was told as a child that, you know, I would go on this journey and that I would go to stay with some nice people until my parents would join me. Quite hard for a little child to take in. Just remember being with all these strange people, just a sea of faces and older children, and just being herded along really, and not quite knowing what was going on. I don't really remember the journey so much. I do remember something when we arrived and we were at the station, and there were just people everywhere, and you just didn't know where you were going to go or what was going to happen to you. When I was taken, and eventually I was taken to this lady who was very kind, and of course a lot of people were speaking in a foreign language as far as I was concerned, and I went back to this lady's house, and she told me afterwards that I hardly cried, that she felt that my mother sort of said to me I must be very brave and I must be very good and I mustn't make a fuss. And I lived with them, and they looked after me. I went to school, I learned English. Their names were Lena and Gerald Sado. They were part of a wonderful family. They didn't have any children themselves, and they looked after me like their own child. I went to school. The thing that surprises me now when I look back is that if they thought my parents were going to come, they made every effort for me to forget the German I knew and to learn English. It was obviously very difficult to try and go to even, young school with little children. But children do pick up languages quite quickly. But I remember just feeling very lost, crying very much at night time, but trying to be very brave when I was with everybody. And then I settled there. He kept telling me my parents would come and we would all be together again. As time went by, I suppose I just adapted. War came and London was bombed and they wanted me to be safe, so I was sent to various boarding schools, which was also quite traumatic for youngsters to do that. Each time it was another new beginning, strange people. And somehow, I can't remember why, but I would go to a boarding school and then after some time something would happen and I'd go to somewhere else. So I think I must have gone to about 3 different places. They were, the final one I went to was in Wales, North Wales. And that had been evacuated from Brighton, from Hove. And there were many children from London at these schools that had just been moved away. Some families I knew, they moved away with their mothers. Fathers perhaps were in the war or fighting or doing work in London, but they sent their family. But my, Lena, I call her Lena, wouldn't leave her husband, and so I went. So I think it was really a build-up of so many times leaving someone that you were with and who you trusted and were familiar with, and then you had to take another step on your own. Perhaps when I look back now, that's why I sort of almost feel more secure on my own sometimes. I don't really look to other people. But what I did do once a year, I went to stay with a cousin who was a real cousin for a few days or a week or 2 weeks, I can't remember how long, because the family I came from were a very religious family in Germany, and the family I lived with were Jewish and kept certain things, but they were not very orthodox. And I went to stay with these cousins who were very orthodox, and I think really so that, for my parents I wouldn't forget everything and I would know the things that I should know about. And they were a very lovely family. Their name was Solomon, but their maiden name was Ukko, who also came from here. And then after some years they moved to Newcastle, and their children all went to yeshivas in Newcastle. A lot of very religious people live there, Jewish people. Then one day they sat me down and told me that my parents had been shot. They had been taken to Riga. I don't know what details they knew, but they never told me. They said that they would like me to be their child and that they wanted to adopt me. I was about 11 at that stage, and truly probably felt they were more like my parents anyway, because I'd lived with them all those years and didn't remember so much of my life in Germany. And then they formally did adopt me and wanted me to call them Mommy and Daddy, which I found very difficult because they'd always been Auntie Lena and Uncle Gerald. Anyway, I made the effort, but I always found it very hard to say. They were just a wonderful family, and their family, my cousins and my aunts and my uncles, I just do feel they're my family, and they were all very supportive, and just treated me like one of them, and I was really one of the lucky ones, because so many children who were older who came, I think, went to families, were treated almost like unpaid servants. I think a lot of people that I've spoken to since had quite bad experiences, and I was just very lucky that I found such a lovely family. I've only discovered now through Frau Blume that in fact they were taken to Riga in 1942. So therefore they had a few years where they must have been in the camp, which I didn't know. And I don't know personally what happened to them, only what I know about that's happened to so many other people. And I try not to think that it might have happened to them, but it probably did. I did have a few postcards from my family, which I kept, and unfortunately when we had a burglary, this little box that I had was taken, so I lost those. I don't know what correspondence there was between the parents, but I was taken to the offices of the Central British Fund by a lady I met, who gave me my travel documents that I had come to England with. They were stored there, and she gave them to me. I have a memory of having this thing round my neck, and it was just a card with your photograph on it and details of your parents. But it was only a few years ago that I met this lady, and she invited me to come there, and she gave me these documents. She also had records of when the Sado family had tried to make contact with my parents with a view to trying to help to bring them to England. on 2 or 3 occasions they did try, because I had an aunt, my adopted family's aunt, sister, and she worked for the Red Cross, and she, tried to help to make the contact. The only thing I do know is that there was an opportunity at one time for my parents to come, but because they were such religious people, it was on a holiday, it was on a festival day, and they wouldn't travel. And they didn't go. Which, to me, makes you wonder and makes you think. I don't think it's right. I know that in the Jewish religion, if it means saving a life, you do anything. But their religion was such that they just obeyed the laws. And that's the only time that I know they really did have a chance, and I don't even know when that was. I have in recent times been contacted by a cousin who I didn't know had existed. He was a professor at Cambridge, and he told me that it was his sister who had arranged for me to come out of Germany. And each time his sister or any of the family had tried to be in touch with me in England, the family had somehow felt that I would be disrupted and I would become sad, and I had just settled. And so they really made excuses for the family not to see me. I've learnt this recently, that I was not well or I was away. And so none of my original family actually did make contact with me later, but they knew people who knew me, and they were assured that I was well and well looked after, and that they shouldn't worry. And it was only a few years ago that I had a letter from this, his name was Herman Lehman, and he said that he felt I was now old enough, and would I like to meet him. And I had such mixed emotions when I got that letter, because I was delighted that there was someone in my family who was alive. And I was angry that it had taken that long, or so I thought, for anyone to contact me. And I did meet with him, and I did tell Lena that I was going, and she wasn't well, she wanted me to be with her, the doctor was coming, she was very unhappy about it. When I came back, he gave me photographs. He gave me photographs of my grandparents and of my parents. My father, he was on my father's side. And I just couldn't believe it. I mean, here I was grown up, married with children, and suddenly, I had some record of my past. And I've since made contact with his sister and family who live in Israel, who are a truly lovely family. And my husband was very astute, and he said that Lena didn't want to know about it, that it worried her and it frightened her. And we came to the conclusion that it was better not to discuss it with her anymore. And I felt terribly guilty going to Israel to meet this family without telling her. But that's what I did. And I'm very pleased I did, because in the last year she wasn't well, and her personality changed and she became very unhappy about things, and she became very demanding and upset with me because I didn't give her all the time she wanted, which was all the time, of course. And I'm sure had she known that I had contacted my family, she would have put it down to that. She would have felt, oh, I'd changed because I'd found my other family and I wasn't interested in her anymore. Instead of which it was none of those things, and I looked after her, but obviously had to still have some of my own life as well. And unhappily she died this year, and it's been quite an emotional time for me, because she has been like my mother almost all of my life. Six years ago, and I was very happy to find them, and then through them and through asking a lot of questions from a lot of people, I found a cousin also on my mother's side who lives in Philadelphia, who is here as well. And it was through them contacting her that I was contacted to come here for this reunion, where this afternoon they will commemorate a memorial on which will be my parents' name. And couldn't not come for that. Well, I remember that there would be air raid sirens, and I hear the noise today. I'm still very aware of it. And we had a shelter in our garden, and I remember my father, Gerald, would pick me up and wrap me up in a eiderdown or something, and we'd rush down to the shelter, and we'd sleep there all night sometimes, and our neighbours would come in as well. And sometimes if we didn't have time, we had a dining room table, and it was made with a steel top and then the wood on top of that. And sometimes I would just be put to bed under this table. I remember when bombs landed near and the windows would shatter and you'd wake up glass around. I remember that. I think I was beginning to feel quite English, actually. And Germany were the enemy. And they were trying to destroy England. I didn't think of it from a Jewish point of view, in connection with the bombings. Only now as an adult, I think your question's very valid. I don't know, but as a child I connected the fact that here was the Germany who had taken my parents. I think to me Germany was against me always round, really. It had destroyed my parents. Well, it hadn't yet, but they weren't with me. And here they were destroying the land that was my home. So I didn't have any warm feelings towards it. I can't believe that at that stage I knew anything. Until well, I wonder whether when I was told about my parents, that they had been shot. Yes, I must then by then have known that other people were taken into camps. It's hard to say at what age I was aware of that. I don't think any of us were aware of that early on, to be honest. I don't think it was until the end of the war that any of us really knew. I think as well that my adopted parents tried not for me to know too much about it. They tried always to protect me from this knowledge, and they certainly didn't go into any details. It wasn't until much older that I began to want to know more and to delve into it and find out things, and went to Israel and went to Yad Vashem. But that was when I was an adult, and then wondered, how come I didn't know more when I was young. When I was at school, certainly not my young years, when I was older, there were certain amount of anti-Semitism. I didn't personally come across any. I was fortunate because there's anti-Semitism in England as there is anywhere else. And some people in the schools did come across it. But the children were, we never spoke about the Shoah, and my Jewish friends who were not at school with me, yes, we would speak and we would want to find out more. Somehow, I don't know why. I mean, now I feel that we tell our children so much more about things that are going on. I feel when I was a young person that what we weren't, I don't know, maybe something inside me didn't want to know. Maybe I often think I block things off, that I was afraid to know more. It really wasn't until I was an adult that I knew more about it, and I certainly didn't personally suffer from people around me. I lived a very normal life afterwards. I was very lucky. I had a lovely family. It was really just the trauma, I suppose, of just leaving at such a very young age, and always having to adapt to another. I think it just made one a little untrusting in a way. You just never knew who was going to leave you, once you were secure, and then suddenly something would fall apart again. And I think it's quite hard to be really trusting, to be sure that what's there is going to stay. And I suppose that happens to everybody, really. I truly can't tell you anything else. I can't tell you details about memories of when I was little or what Germany was like. I'm sorry. I have this cousin, and she said that my father just worked for to earn a living. He didn't have a profession. which really surprises me, because it seems that most of his family, had been, maybe I'm thinking of the sisters who then married and their families, but they seem to have professions, but he just earned enough just working, and whatever jobs he did, I don't know, he didn't, he was a good man who worked hard, but always struggled somewhat. He had a brother who, they were both bachelors till, I don't think the brother actually ever did marry, but this Ukko family, the father died and there were no brothers, and they would always go there on sort of the Jewish holidays and take their services, and I think he did a lot of community work, from what I can gather. They were just sort of very good people who tried to do a lot for others. I don't know. No, I just have gathered, the sort of people that they were. I don't think really I can tell you anything else. I went yesterday to where I lived, and we stood and we looked at it, and I wondered if I could remember that I actually had lived there. I kidded myself, perhaps I did remember, but I don't know. I really do believe that a lot of... You see, you asked me about the bombing in London. Now, I remember that so clearly. Now, how could I remember from one year to another year something so clearly? That's why I really believe a lot of memories come with repeating it, talking to other people about it, maybe photographs, and you feel very vividly that you remember it. Having had no one to talk about my life with, and almost being encouraged to forget it, maybe this has a part of why I don't remember what happened before. The journey part of it, I do have strong feelings rather than real memories about moments. But life here before, I don't suppose I did very much, I suppose I just, like a small child, would just play outside, and I don't suppose I even went to school yet. So there was nothing to remember. I certainly, came from a kind home. You would probably remember if awful things happened to you. But when everything's fine, then everything's normal and you don't. That's how you feel life is. Well, I've learnt that from this Professor Lehmann, and he gave me a family tree of my father's brothers and sisters, and some died when they were young from tuberculosis, and others married and moved away to different places. Another brother also perished in the camp. I don't think any of the others actually went to concentration camps. And on my mother's family, I've only she and her sister, they both were taken away, and my cousins all as well, except for the one lady who's here, Gerda Weinstein, who, when she was about 16 or 18, I think, she went with a youth group, and they somehow left on this famous ship called the Patrica, and they managed to go via other countries, and eventually they got to Palestine, and the British wouldn't let them land, and somebody made a little bomb, a little something, just to damage the boat a little bit, so that they would be forced to allow them to land. They wanted them to go to Mauritius, and the hole in the boat was larger than they'd intended, and the boat sank, and most of those people were drowned, but she actually was one of the people on the top deck, and they jumped over, and they swam into shore, and they were allowed to stay in Palestine. And so she lived there, and she married there, and so it's only through meeting her recently that she showed me photographs of when I was little and here and with my parents, and she just remembered my parents, and she told me what lovely people they were and how they used to spend time together. Otherwise I wouldn't even know that. So, but I don't know about the rest of the families. I suppose discussion, really. So people began to read about it, began to hear about it, and discuss it with friends. I say at home, I think my family avoided discussing it too much in front of me. But yes, I think with friends we read and we learnt about what went on. I don't know. I really don't, as a young person, remember a lot about it. It seems so much more to have been when I was older. I can't really think at what age I really became more aware and wanted to know more and find out about more. I feel I'm wasting your time. I don't think I've got anything else to tell you. I'm sorry.
You're not wasting my time. If you want to finish the interview,
yes,
you can finish it, but you are surely not wasting my time.
I do feel that there isn't anything that I can add that's of any interest to anybody. Yes, well, after the war, I then came home from boarding school, and I went to a local school where we lived, and I studied. I went to synagogue. I went to Hebrew classes. I had good friends. I was an average student. I left school. I did a secretarial I went to college and did a secretarial course. I worked for the British Red Cross for quite a long time. I worked for a publisher for quite a while. I married when I was not yet 21. I didn't have a profession otherwise. I had 3 children at quite a young age. My husband was a furniture manufacturer at the time, as well my family. That's how we met, really. My adopted father was he was a furniture manufacturer, very well respected and very well known. There were a lot of Jewish people in the furniture business in England, and they all built themselves up from very poor beginnings. A lot of them actually came from Russia and from Poland many years earlier, when they were young. And then my husband sold his business and went into an engineering business that his father had started. His father had died before I knew him. And he built that up. And it wasn't an easy thing for me to be involved in engineering, and he really preferred that I was not taking up something. I did a lot of charity work. I worked for what we call a Citizens Advice Bureau, which was just a place where anybody could come in and get advice and be helped. And I felt I learnt a lot from that, as well as helping the people that came. But I did help in the business a little bit at times, more from the secretarial angle, but I didn't have my own profession. And I'm often quite sorry that I didn't. I have a daughter-in-law now who's got 3 children, and she was a qualified teacher, and now she's taken another degree and she's just qualified. She actually got a first, which with 3 children to bring up and all sorts of problems along the way is quite amazing. And she's now a qualified nutritionist, and the reason she can't be here with my son now is because she's started a new job today in a hospital. But I really was still part of that last generation where a lot of us didn't have a profession. Almost feel guilty about it now, but I think our husbands were different to husbands today, and they expected when they came home for everything to be ready and right for them. He is, yes, he's Jewish, and he's here with me, and he's been a wonderful husband and great support. He's always encouraged me since we met my cousin to find out as much as we can. He came with me to Israel to meet my family there. He was born in England. His mother was from Poland and his father was from Russia. He had one sister who died when she was in her 50s. She has 4 children. They lived in Scotland, and so they're the only immediate family that he has, that we have between us, because I have no brothers or sisters. So they were the only really close family that we had. but we both have cousins and extended family. But he's been wonderful over all the years. And I don't know really how I would have been without him. Oh, I've thought a long time about whether I would come here or not. And I think I didn't really want to, and yet part of me kept feeling that I should. I should go back. I should try and find out things. But I think because I was so young, there weren't the memories for me to find. I mean, some years ago they had, in England, they had a meeting of all the children and people connected with people who had perished in camps. And I didn't go to it. I'm sorry now I didn't go. I should have done. But I didn't go because these were all people who would be meeting other people and remembering when they were at school together or remembering what they used to do together. And there was a point in them meeting each other, whereas I felt for me to go, I wouldn't know anybody, I wouldn't remember anybody, I wouldn't have any memories to talk about. And it was the same thing, I think, about coming here, that what was I going to find? And then when we had the letter about this service today, then I knew I was coming. I knew for that I would definitely come, and I was pleased that something had made up my mind for me, if you like. And I am pleased to have come, to have seen where I came from, where my parents came from. And it was right, and I probably should have come before, but I gave you the reasons why I didn't, I suppose. I have very mixed feelings. I think the people of my parents' generation, the older people, I would find very difficult to trust. I would feel, what are they thinking? What did they do? For young people, I feel quite differently. I feel it's very hard for young people, mainly here, because I think that they've got so much to overcome. I think that it's their country, they're proud of their country, and it's sad that they've got something that they can feel so ashamed about. And I think that must be very difficult. I'm sure there are plenty as well who, are ingrained with what their parents have taught them and probably feel much the same as their parents did, but that's going to be all over the world. But I think for the older people who joined, I mean, they must have all known what was going on. Maybe they didn't all know. I'm really not interested in them, but I do feel for young people in this country. And I do think that a big effort has been made. I would be afraid for Germany to become all-powerful again, like in Europe, for instance. I think it's got to be a much more shared Europe. Because Germany is a large country, a powerful country. And I think it is a little bit frightening to think that they would take over. Maybe I shouldn't say that. Coming here now, I suppose it makes me feel slightly differently because yes, I did come from here. But I don't basically feel German, no. I don't really feel German. I feel English. Until this week I wouldn't have even hesitated for a moment, but being here now, I know that I am German. I don't think I feel there's anything hidden. I think that I think a lot of people pretended that they couldn't do anything, and I think a lot of people could. I think a lot of things should have become knowledge to other people, and it was kept secret, and it wasn't passed on. And I think a lot of people sat by. Had they not had many more of them not sat by, I don't think things would have been allowed to happen the way they did. And I think a lot of people suffered as well because they didn't sit by. So human nature being what it is, it's easier not to do anything. It happens all the time. I wouldn't. I don't understand how people can. Really. I'm surprised how many people... Well, there aren't many, but the people that do, I say I'm surprised because I know that I couldn't. I suppose if you're quite a lot older and you leave and you know it's your own country and it must be much more ingrained in you, then I try and picture England, if you like, if something happened and I had to leave England. I'm sure I would always feel that England had been good to me and it had been my country. So I suppose that's how people feel who lived here. But for me, no. Personally not, no. I know people do, but I don't personally know anyone who has come back to live in Germany. This cousin of mine in Cambridge, he was a haematologist, and this was before the war, and he told his professor who he was working with that he was coming back to Germany, and he advised him not to. He said, I think as a Jew you shouldn't really go back. There are going to be problems. And in fact, there was a sort of saying, he said, I've got your white coat and I'll hang it on the door and it's there for you when you come back. And he came back to Germany, and I think that was in 1936. But he stayed. I think it was after the Kristallnacht, and he then left and he went back to England. But since the war, I don't personally know. But I know there are people who have. Mm.